August 27th, 1979, a bright summer afternoon on the narrow road between Newry and Warrenpool, the calm before the storm. A convoy of British paratroopers rolled past Narrowwater Castle, unaware that the Provisional IRA South Armagh brigade had turned the roadside into a killing field. At 4:40 p.m, the first bomb erupted beneath the truck, a blast so powerful it hurled men and metal into the air. 6 soldiers were killed instantly. Survivors scrambled, guns blazing into the tree line, thinking they were under fire from across the border. Then came the second explosion. Half an hour later, as reinforcements and medics crowded the scene, a second device, hidden near the gatehouse, detonated with surgical precision. 12 more soldiers died where they stood. 18 dead in total, the single bloodiest attack on British forces during the Troubles. Across the lock, a civilian lorry driver was gunned down amid the confusion, and before the smoke cleared, news broke that Lord Mountbatten had been blown up off the coast of Sligo, another IRA bomb the same day. It was the IRA's message to Britain: we can strike anywhere, anytime. The Warren Point ambush wasn't just an ambush, it was a demonstration, cold, calculated, and devastating. The borderlands of South Armagh would never look peaceful again. Thomas Slab Murphy, born August 26, 1949, is a name that echoes through the shadows of modern Irish history. A man of few words, but enormous influence, Murphy was the ghost of the borderlands, reclusive, calculating, and feared. A man of few words, but enormous influence. To some, he was the quiet farmer from South Armagh. To others, the mastermind of the Provisional IRA's most feared brigade, a figure who blended militant command with the cold precision of a businessman. His farm, split by the invisible line between County Armagh and County Louth, became more than just land. It was an operation hub, a smuggler's artery pulsing with fuel, weapons, and money. Accused of everything from coordinating deadly attacks to running a multi-million-pound smuggling empire, Murphy's life reads like a collision between rebellion and organised crime. A man who lived in the grey space between patriot and outlaw. Thomas Murphy came of age in a land divided, a place where politics bled into everyday life and rebellion was part of the air people breathed. Born into a family of hardline Republicans, Murphy and his brothers were raised on stories of struggle, loyalty, and resistance. Their family farm straddled the border, half in County Armagh, half in County Louth, a fault line between two nations. It wasn't just home, it was an advantage, a perfect escape route, a perfect hiding place. The Murphys were cattle dealers by trade, known locally as the Slabs, a nickname that would follow Thomas for life. By the early 1970s, Slab had become more than a farmer. He was a rising force in the IRA's South Armagh brigade, the most feared and efficient unit of the Troubles. They were experts in ambushes, bombings, and cross-border strikes, ghosts of the countryside who hid hard and disappeared without a trace. Murphy's climb was fast and ruthless. His discipline and cold precision drew the attention of the IRA's Army Council, who would later elevate him to Chief of Staff. From that point on, Slab wasn't just another commander, he was the strategist behind some of the most calculated and devastating attacks of the era. The 1979 Warren Point ambush, where 18 British soldiers were killed in a single afternoon, was the bloodiest blow the IRA ever dealt to the British Army, and one of the most infamous incidents linked to Murphy. On that same day, over 100 miles away, the Mullaghmore bombing claimed the life of Lord Louis Mountbatten, 1st Earl Mountbatten of Burma, along with 3 others, including 2 children. 2 attacks, hours apart, a message carved in fire and blood. Both attacks sent shockwaves through Britain and Ireland, cementing Murphy's reputation as a formidable figure in the IRA's militant wing. Murphy's name was whispered in the aftermath. He was never charged, never convicted, but both British intelligence and the Garda Special Branch believed he'd played a crucial hand in the operation, as part of his broader command and logistical influence within the Provisional IRA South Armagh brigade. Not as the man who pressed the button, but as the man who made it possible. By then, Murphy was thought to be the de facto commander of the IRA's South Armagh brigade, described as the man who approved or coordinated major cross-border actions, overseeing the movement of weapons and explosives, and managing safe houses and escape routes that allowed volunteers to strike in Northern Ireland and vanish into the Republic within minutes. The Warren Point ambush, with its precision, dual explosions, and perfect exploitation of the border, bore the hallmarks of South Armagh's planning discipline, a signature often attributed to Murphy's organisational control. Sources suggested Murphy's logistical network supplied the explosives, likely stored or transported through farms under his control near Smuggling. Through the 1980s, Thomas Slab Murphy's reach allegedly extended far beyond the borderlands of South Armagh. By then, he was believed to be the IRA's chief of staff, the man quietly pulling strings as bombings rocked London, Belfast, and beyond. But Murphy's real power wasn't in the explosions, it was in the supply lines. Intelligence reports placed him at the centre of one of the IRA's most audacious feats, the Libyan arms connection. Shipments of rifles, explosives, and even surface-to-air missiles were ferried across the Mediterranean, bound for Irish shores. One of the skippers, Adrian Hopkins, would later testify that Murphy himself had met a Libyan agent in Greece, coordinating the transfer and personally overseeing the unloading of weapons when they reached Ireland. It was a colossal operation, tons of munitions smuggled under the nose of Western intelligence, and it confirmed what many already believed. Thomas Slab Murphy wasn't just a commander, he was the IRA's quartermaster, strategist, and banker, the man who kept the war machine alive. But soon, Thomas Slab Murphy's name was no longer whispered only in border pubs or intelligence reports. It was making front-page headlines. In 1987, the Sunday Times accused him of masterminding IRA bombing campaigns across Britain. For Murphy, it was a step too far. Furious and determined to clear his name, he sued the paper for libel in Dublin, igniting one of the most sensational trials of the decade. The courtroom became a battlefield. On one side, the reclusive border farmer, on the other, the weight of British and Irish intelligence, journalists, and ex-paramilitaries. The stakes couldn't have been higher. A victory would cleanse his reputation, a loss would brand him the very thing he denied being. The verdict fell against him. Then it was overturned on appeal, only to end in defeat once again when the retrial concluded. During that retrial, the witness list read like a roll call from the dark heart of the Troubles. Former IRA insiders Sean O'Callaghan and Aidan Collins, alongside Garda officers, customs agents, and British soldiers, all taking the stand against him. For the first time, the shadowy figure of Slab Murphy had been dragged into the light, and what the world saw only deepened his legend. Aidan Collins, who later chronicled his time inside the IRA in a tell-all memoir, never lived long enough to see its full impact. Not long after speaking out, he was brutally murdered near his home, a killing many believe was payback for his testimony against Murphy. Despite Murphy's furious denials, the jury's verdict was clear. He had been an IRA commander and a smuggler. The ruling shattered his public image and tore away what little anonymity he had left. The Sunday Times refused to back down. Instead, it doubled down, publishing new claims from Adrian Hopkins, the skipper who ferried weapons from Libya, who detailed Murphy's alleged role in orchestrating those shipments. By the time the dust settled, the trial had peeled back the layers of Murphy's secret world. What emerged was not the quiet farmer of South Armagh, but a man painted as both militant and mob boss, a figure whose shadow loomed over every gun, bomb, and deal that crossed the Irish border. As whispers of Murphy's role in the IRA grew louder, another story began to surface, one that painted him not just as a commander, but as a criminal kingpin. His farm, perched on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, was said to be more than just soil and livestock. It was the heart of a smuggling empire that stretched across 2 jurisdictions. In 2005, law enforcement on both sides of the border struck. The British Assets Recovery Agency and Ireland's Criminal Assets Bureau launched coordinated raids on Murphy-linked businesses, an unprecedented joint operation. What they uncovered was staggering. A network moving fuel, cigarettes, livestock, and grain, all washed through a web of legitimate fronts. The BBC's Underworld Rich List estimated Murphy's fortune at £4 million, much of it allegedly built from the shadows. Among the discoveries was a purpose-built underground chamber near his home, rumoured to have been used by the IRA for interrogations. It only deepened the mythology surrounding him: the farmer who was also a general, a smuggler, a ghost. Murphy hit back, issuing a rare public statement. He denied everything: smuggling, criminal ties, the lot, claiming he was just a simple farmer forced to sell land to cover legal fees from his failed libel case. But few believed him. The raids had seized tankers, shotguns, cigarettes, and nearly €1 million in cash. For the public it was clear, this was no ordinary farmer. While Murphy's alleged involvement in the IRA's military operations was under scrutiny, his name was also increasingly associated with a vast smuggling empire. The breakpoint came at dawn on March 9, 2006, when the stillness of South Armagh was shattered by flashing lights and helicopter blades. In a massive cross-border operation, police, soldiers, and customs agents from both sides of the border descended on Murphy's land. A coordinated strike aimed straight at the heart of his empire. It was one of the largest cross-border operations in modern Irish history, and its scale said everything about the man they were after. When the dust settled, investigators uncovered 4 diesel laundering plants, underground fuel tanks, and a fleet of tankers hidden across Murphy's properties. They seized computers, documents, and cash, the bones of a smuggling machine that had been running for decades. But the raids didn't just hit Murphy's business, they hit Irish politics. As headlines exploded, Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams came to Murphy's defence, declaring, "Tom Murphy is not a criminal. He is a good Republican and a key supporter of Sinn Féin's peace strategy." His statement lit a fuse. Arlene Foster, then First Minister, fired back, calling Murphy exactly what she believed he was: a criminal, one whose reputation in South Armagh spoke for itself. Even so, within Republican circles, Murphy's myth endured. But for investigators, the picture was clear. This wasn't just ideology, this was industry. And behind the farm gates, Murphy's empire was finally beginning to crumble. After decades of suspicion, raids, and rumours, Thomas Slab Murphy was finally brought down, not for bombs or smuggling, but for tax evasion. Following a relentless investigation by the Criminal Assets Bureau, a Dublin court found him guilty of 9 counts of evading tax in December 2015. It wasn't the crime the authorities had hunted him for, but it was enough. The 9-week trial, held under anti-terror legislation amid fears of jury intimidation, exposed the double life behind Murphy's farmer persona. He had failed to file tax returns between 1996 and 2004, but ledgers, diaries, and seized documents told another story, one of undeclared wealth and shadow finance. In February 2016, the verdict came down hard: 18 months in prison, no suspension. Murphy was taken straight to Portlaoise Prison, Ireland's most secure facility, the same fortress that housed paramilitaries and gangland killers. His transfer under armed escort spoke volumes. Even behind bars, he was considered dangerous. Murphy appealed in November 2016, but the Court of Appeal shut him down on every front, confirming the conviction. By January 2017, the King of South Armagh was quietly moved to the open, low-security Loughlin House, where he served the remainder of his sentence, walking free in April 2018. The man the authorities could never catch for war, they finally caught for paperwork. When Thomas Slab Murphy walked free in 2018, it felt less like an ending and more like the closing of a legend. His release marked the final act in a life that straddled 2 worlds, one of politics, the other of power. To some, he remains a folk hero, a symbol of resistance who stood his ground against British rule. To others, he was the very embodiment of Ireland's criminal underworld, a smuggler, a warlord, a man who blurred the line between patriot and profiteer. His story is soaked in contradiction: whispers of bombings and gun running, smuggling fortunes, and shadowy meetings with revolutionaries and criminals alike. Reports claim that in later years, Murphy grew disillusioned with the peace process, drifting from Sinn Féin and cutting ties with the movement he once defined. Rumours swirled of contact with dissident Republicans, though as always, nothing was ever proven. Even now, his name hangs heavy over South Armagh, part myth, part memory. a man who built an empire from the border itself, and whose conviction for something as ordinary as tax evasion served as the state's final act of justice. For some he was a soldier, for others a criminal. For Ireland, he remains a reminder that in the long shadow of the Troubles, the truth is never simple, and the war never truly ends. That was it for today's video. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see our next videos.